and welcome to our April Talk Music Webinar. We're excited to be here again this month and to be able to talk with you. As you can see, Laura Payne is here with us, and she is excited to be our presenter tonight and talk to you about a great subject. We began to talk about different topics, and she said, why don't we talk about dealing with personality differences within your music department? I said, yes, that's amazing because we all deal with it, we all face it, and it is something that's super, super important because, I mean, just think about this. The more you work with people, the more you learn that we're all pretty different. And so we all handle things differently and our different personalities, and so it is really an important topic, of course, and something I think that Laura can really share some of her experiences with us tonight, and we will definitely have a time at the end for questions. Now, in our past webinars, sometimes people are a little bit reluctant to ask questions. We really want you to feel free, be comfortable here. If you want to talk hypothetical, that's totally fine. We'll say, in some other church, what do you do about this? We'll just deal with hypotheticals tonight for you. But at the end, and no one will see your questions but me, I'll kind of be watching as you're going through the webinar. If you have questions, just start to type them in there, and I'll get to see them, and I'll correspond with you even as she's speaking tonight. And then at the end, we'll go to some questions and answers, and you'll be able to ask your question to Laura yourself, and hopefully get some answers tonight. So anyway, without stalling too much longer, I want to go ahead and get started and let Laura begin to talk to us about this great topic. So Laura, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's fun to do this and work together to try to talk a little bit about the music department and some challenges and opportunities we all face. I did spend 8.5, 9 years with a local congregation as a music pastor, and I can tell you that in that journey, I learned very quickly that dealing with people was absolutely a vital issue when working in a music department. You know, you quickly learn when you're involved in music that the music ministry is far more about people and far less about music than you ever imagine. I'm in a college environment right now, and a lot of times young future ministers, college students, they're just all worried about the music and their technical skill and their technical ability, and if they're going to be able to play chord charts well enough, and if they're going to be able to know the parts well enough. Well, the reality is there's a whole lot of this people business that can make or break your success as part of a team and as a leader in a team. Music is more collaborative in nature than so many other ministries of the church. Music happens together. You know, you can be a Sunday school teacher and work on your lesson at home and plan ahead how you're going to do crafts or classroom management with the kids, and then go and implement it, and at the end of the day kind of evaluate yourself and walk away and give yourself a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But music is highly collaborative. And so this makes the music department a potential ministry of disunity, misunderstanding, and tension. Many times the music department sort of gets this bad reputation from pastors as being the most troubled department. I think it's not that music is so of the devil, or that music is so influenced by the devil always, even though we hear that preached sometimes. But I think the music department, because it's a collaborative effort, more than the preaching of the word, more than teaching, more than a lot of other components of the church, it's collaborative. And so the music department brings to the surface any dysfunction that we have as members of the body. I hope that makes sense, but it kind of brings to light dysfunction. So today I want to talk about several things. I want to talk, first of all, I'm just going to give you an outline of what we're going to chat about over the next 40 minutes. First, we're going to talk in general about artists and the artistic temperament. I think that's a really big topic because so much of the music department is about artistry and artistic personalities. Secondly, we're going to talk about some opposing personality traits that can often create conflict within the music department. And then finally, we're going to just sort of sum up the night and talk a little bit about recognizing emotionally unhealthy behaviors. And that sort of extends the conversation beyond just talking about personality, but knowing when things are not just a personality issue, when there's a little deeper sort of emotional unhealthiness going on. So that's kind of the agenda for the night. So we want to start off talking about artists. And I have to ask your forgiveness in advance. I'm getting over bronchitis. So if I cough, I apologize. I'm trying very hard not to. Case in point. Anyway, so dealing with artists or the artistic personality, the creative personality, if you are on a team tonight or you're the leader of the team, many people on your team will be the artistic kind of creative personality. Music is a creative pursuit, and the people that are skilled and gifted in music are probably going to potentially have some of those personality traits. The creative artistic type puts great value on beauty, perfection, and excellence. And this is really important to understand, because when you get those kind of people on a team, the very thing that makes them quality and worth having as part of the team brings with it this little rub, this little thing, grain of sand, so to speak, that causes them to be sensitive. Because they're sensitive to beauty, they're sensitive to their world, they're sensitive to a pursuit of excellence. That's what makes them artists. It's kind of like the story, The Princess and the Pea. The very thing that defined the princess in that childhood story was the fact that she was so sensitive to the pea that was underneath the pile of mattresses. Equally so, the people on your team who are most capable and most artistic are going to potentially be highly sensitive. They have very high standards for themselves, and they have very high standards for the team. So they're going to set high expectations, usually for one of those two things. And sometimes we can become bothered, especially as leaders or people who are all about just kind of getting it done, getting the job done, people who are all about harmony and unity, people that are all about, you know what, everyone should have a chance, everyone deserves an opportunity, everyone should be allowed to give their gift to God. That kind of personality often struggles with the perfection and the artistic nature of the true artisans on the team. When they express opinions, they often come across as highly passionate, right? And that passion can often be misinterpreted as a critical spirit. So you might have a singer who is very good with parts, and they have that expert ear, and they know when the part's right, they know when the part's wrong. When that person expresses and speaks up and says, hey, this part's not correct, or we're doing something wrong here, other people who are not as discriminating, other people who are not as perfectionists in their musical pursuit can interpret that person's motive as being critical. Whereas the artist is simply saying, if God is deserving of our best, then someone's got to be in charge of quality control, right? And artists often take it on themselves to be the voice of quality control. You know, some artistic creative types have such a spirit of perfectionism about them that they will actually critique themselves out of the team. Or they will critique the team out of their life. I've seen both happen. I've seen times when a very capable person is not giving of themselves in the music department. And people are trying to figure out why. Why is brother so-and-so not playing the bass. He's so good, and we love him, and he's so fabulous. But if you get to the root of his artistic personality, you discover that he cannot bear to be a part of something that maybe somehow doesn't measure up to his artistic standards. And he'd rather not be involved than be part of something that somehow challenges his sense of perfection or what is honoring of God. And that's a really important thing for leaders to understand about artistic people, and for artistic people to understand about themselves. Because I think there's a give and take here. I think that leaders of the artistic personality have to be wise enough to listen and tune in to that attitude or spirit of perfection and use it in an effective way to grow and strengthen the team. Likewise, the very artistic personality has to always remember to submit their artistry to the greater good of the body and the greater good of the team around them. And so working with a true artistic personality is often a give and take. It's a give and take between those who are not as artistic and perfecting, but it's also a give and take on behalf of the artists. And if you are leading someone with a truly artistic personality, if you are dealing with them, whether it's a peer-to-peer relationship or a leader to a team member relationship, this is a conversation that you may have to have. Because sometimes we can just come against one another and be like, you're always critical, you're always negative, you never seem to express any trust in the people around you. And sometimes that behavior is actually the surface behavior, and we got to get deeper and figure out what is driving that artistic person that's making them come across as critical, that makes them come across as judgmental, whether it be of themselves or their peers. So dealing with the artistic personality is a huge part of working in the music department. This artistic, creative personality sometimes can struggle with time management and structure. They might enjoy being very spontaneous. They're great at what they do, but they kind of live in the world of spontaneity. They're always just, they're the one who picks the song set in the wee hours Saturday night, and man, it's awesome, and they make great choices, but nobody else on the team knows what's going on, and they kind of rely on their own sense of spontaneity to carry them through. Well, if you're a one-man band and you play for yourself and you have your little harmonica stand, right there, and you sing in your mic and you play the drums by kicking your feet, if you're the one-man band, that works. You can make all the decisions you want at 3 in the morning, and you're not accountable to anybody, and that's okay. Sometimes pastors have the benefit, the wonderful benefit, creative pastors, they can write their sermon, and they and God can have a moment at all hours of the night, and they're not accountable for that time management and structure. But when you work with a team, I think the way to express it is this, that artistic effort and creative effort, if it's ever going to flourish in a group setting, has got to live with some kind of parameters. So leaders have to find balance working with these kind of creative people. You have to point out to them, hey, we love your creativity. Or a team member to another team member, man, I love your spontaneity. I love how capable you are in in the pinch hit. I love the fact that you can come up at the last second and everything just flows and goes. However, we're a team. And that aspect of your personality makes it hard for the rest of the team around you to do their best and to flourish and shine. And when you have those conversations in those kind of terms, you take it to a whole new level. Then it's not just being critical or being judgmental of someone's personality. It's about functioning well as the body of Christ. I think a good analogy to use with creative personalities and artistic types is the analogy of the river. And the river needs a bank. All right? Imagine the Mississippi. The Mississippi is only destructive if it has no banks. The sheer force and intensity of that water and that body of water, the force of that gift, so to speak, is powerful. Everyone recognizes its power. But the Mississippi, when and if it breaks its banks, is incredibly destructive. So for the artistic personality, the structure has to be presented as the banks that guide the gift. And I think that kind of language makes sense to artists because they ultimately understand, okay, I'm accountable not just to be gifted, but I'm accountable with how I manage and how I steer my gift. Tensions can really easily get out of control when you have a team with strong creative types and strong structured types. I saw this somewhere in my life, a location not to be mentioned, with two people whose names I won't say. I saw this live out in a very, very practical sense. I worked with two musicians who were both valuable and precious to the team and to the environment that they were working in. But you could not find two more drastically different personality types. One individual was incredibly creative and free-spirited. They were a tender soul, very tender towards God, tender towards the needs of their peers. They brought that tenderness into their artistry, and so their playing was always very appropriate and very in tune with what the song demanded. But they were a free spirit. They were the person who was always flying down the aisle 10 minutes after everybody else had started practice, making a mad dash for their instrument. And when they got there, they were desperately turning their heads and asking people around them, what key is this song in? And, how does this introduction go? And they'd grab their headphones and stick one ear in to try to listen and make sure that they had it down. And what they produced was always beautiful. But the context of how they produced it was absolutely typical of the artistic personality, just a little bit scattered, a little bit random. But the heart was a beautiful thing. They had a teammate who they needed to collaborate very closely with, who was the complete opposite personality. This individual was the vice president of a company and lived their life in an incredibly structured manner. Very rigid, planned everything ahead, wanted no surprises, poured hours of personal work into making sure they were prepared, making sure that they were equipped for what the situation demanded. And they brought that sense of structure and rigidity to the team. And they were maybe a little less artistic, maybe a little less sensitive, certainly less sensitive in their personality. They held themselves to a fiercely high standard of structure and preparation. They were always 20 minutes early, setting up, making sure they were ready, making sure they were prepared. Well, you can imagine that these two individuals drove each other nuts. And the problem didn't go away. The problem became so deeply rooted in the hearts of these two people that it just about split their ability to ever play together, because both saw their personality as the ultimate expression of honor to God. The artistic personality felt that in the tenderness and the patience and the love and the kindness and respect towards one another, despite being late and being a little scattered, that was the ultimate Christ-like opportunity. Whereas the structured person saw his excellence and discipline and dogma and everything that he did to be on time and prepared and organized and clarity and charts and all of that stuff. That was his way of honoring the presence of God and bringing his excellence and best. The irony is both individuals had beautiful qualities and brought two very different things to the table. But the tension between the two styles absolutely threatened to tear apart the band. And I can honestly say that as a leader working with personalities, that was probably one of the greatest challenges I ever faced, working with personalities, because it was so difficult to let both individuals know you're both right and you're both wrong. And so I recognize how much the artistic personality can become a source of tension to the leader or to the life of a team. But I do believe that the only way to ever kind of resolve it is to just have honest dialogue and put on the table the reality of the tensions, put on the table the reality of the dilemmas, and have conversations that hopefully bring unity, bring peace, and remind everybody that, you know, the scripture tells us that the body is all valuable, and the hand does not have the right to tell the foot, I don't need you. And the eye doesn't have the right to tell the mouth, I don't need you. That every part of the body is critical and important. So artistic personalities are a huge part of kind of managing and dealing with personalities and what could potentially be difficult personalities. Remember this, if you're a leader and you're on this webinar tonight, if you're a leader, take a moment right now and just kind of reflect in your mind, am I more the artistic leader that does things spontaneously, and my primary go-to mode is sort of creativity and spontaneity? Or am I the structured leader that relies on lists and systems and planning center and organization to lead my team? After you've asked yourself that question, then you have to ask yourself, what challenges does my leadership style give for the people on my team that are opposite from me? What tensions have we had together as a team that might simply be because of this personality distinction? If you do a little self-reflection, it will go a long ways towards troubleshooting some of the conflict that you may have had with different personalities. So if you are a creative, artistic leader, you've got to recognize the potential that you have to drive the organized people around you crazy, right? You got to own your mess, own your spontaneity, and bring people alongside you that you give permission. You have to give them permission to speak into your life and to help you not be a mess. If you are a rigid, organized, structured kind of a leader, then you've got to recognize that maybe you have to give more room to the people around you that are creative and need a little more freedom. I want to move on. Jeremy, are we doing all right?
We're doing good. We need to go ahead and wrap up fairly soon. I got some questions coming in, but go ahead and finish up your last point.
All right, sounds good. Well, the last thing I want to say in closing, we've talked about just this dichotomy of personality types. We've talked about artistic versus structured. You know, you can deal with conflict related to people who are very traditional versus people who are cutting edge. I think most types of personality conflicts can be resolved with communication. But the last thing I want to point out, just in closing before we take some questions, I think that when you're dealing with difficult personalities, it's important that you recognize if someone is just basically emotionally unhealthy, right? You know, like some things cannot be resolved by negotiation if one of the parties is just essentially an emotionally unhealthy person. Sometimes difficult personalities have to be dealt with by those honest talks like, hey, you've got some things you need to resolve here. So I want to give you a quick list and then we'll take some questions. Here's some things that are a marker that someone on your team might be a little emotionally unhealthy. If they make every issue about them, like they're overly sensitive all the time, right? You know, you're just trying to change mics because one mic is bad, and they interpret that to be that you don't like them and you don't want them to sing, okay? That's an emotionally unhealthy person. If they bottle up their feelings and then explode, like yes, 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 right? That's emotionally unhealthy. It's hard to negotiate. It's hard to talk about that. If they use unhealthy communication styles, you know, they're just, they don't know how to sit and talk through problems, and you've tried to have that conversation with them about little things, and they're not healthy in their communication. And finally, two more things that are very, when you deal with people, look for these markers. If they have a complaining spirit. Sometimes people are emotionally unhealthy, and it expresses itself that they're always complaining. And finally, if you have people on your team that are speaking out against leadership regularly, that's an emotionally unhealthy person. And as a team member or as a leader, whichever role you're in, you have to address the emotional unhealthy behaviors so that the personalities can get along better. See, some things aren't about personality. Some things are that people are unhealthy. And we have to be wise and prayerful in how we manage all of that. So that's just some thoughts I had tonight, Jeremy. I'm sure you've got some questions or maybe some things people have asked.
Yeah. Well, it's excellent what you're talking about, because we're all sitting here thinking about, okay, yes, I know exactly who she's talking about. You know, we're thinking of people that we work with that these very much so apply to. So thank you for sharing that. Everything you were saying, I was just trying to take that in and think about how this will help us handle people that we deal with that you're talking about. One question I had before there's a couple I want to get to, but one I had for you, if you don't mind if I ask one, is just kind of get people going here. What do you say? How do you handle, say, a peer or an adult, you know, maybe your own age, that really likes to be in control? They have a choleric personality, and they kind of do push maybe some boundaries with you, even publicly, say in rehearsals. But you can tell that's kind of their personality, is to kind of take charge, to be in charge. But it's almost, say it's just that they're very choleric. How do you handle people like that?
You know, that's a great question, because I've definitely dealt with that. You know, I always feel like in a rehearsal, I feel like I'm clear and I'm strong and trying to, you know, I don't feel like I leave a lot of dead space. And yet there are those personalities that are so quick to kind of point out, you know, any little thing that's wrong or confusing. I think a lot of times we assume that an aggressive personality or a choleric personality like that, someone who's a little bit controlling, sometimes it's easy to assume that they just want you to push back at them publicly. But I've actually found that some of those people that are that way are even more sensitive to public criticism. And I've found that if I push back at them publicly, like, you know what, please don't question me right now, like if I would do something like that, they actually get offended and hurts their feelings. And, you know, it's sort of like they can be aggressive, but they can't take aggression. A lot of people are that way. I've found that it's almost easier to just go to them and say, hey, you know what, I don't know if you realize it. I know you're just trying to clarify. I know you're just trying to, like, there's an alto one time it felt like none of the altos would speak up, so she was sort of the voice for the alto section. And she always couched it that way. We all would like to know. And I always wondered if it was really we all or if it was just her, you know?
Right.
So I finally had a conversation and said, you know what? You may not realize, like, you come across as, like, you're super questioning and kind of bossy and, can we work on this a little bit? And at the same time, I value that if there's something not clear, I appreciate that you're trying to, bring it up, but, let's just try to be a little more laid back. And sometimes, if it gets really out of hand, I've even been like, you know what, I hear your question, but if you don't mind, I'm not going to address that right now. And I think if you do it nicely, but a couple times, they realize, okay, wait, I gotta trust the leader. I've got to trust the leader that I'm not always going to get my question answered. Because sometimes people like that, if you answer every question they bring up publicly, you actually sort of feed their urge to be in control. Yes. So sometimes you have to almost take the control away and say, you know what, I hear your question. If you don't mind, I'm going to choose not to answer that. We're doing this other thing right now. We'll come back to that. And I think sometimes taking a little bit of the control away in the kindest way possible helps those people to kind of check them a bit. Because otherwise they can get so bossy.
Yeah, and hijack the whole thing. Try to. Yeah.
They try to. Yeah, they think that's their call.
Right. We are going to go to Laura. Amy Singh. She's in Virginia, and she has a question. Amy, I'm going to unmute your mic, and you can ask your question to Laura. You there?
I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, we've got several people on our team that we all kind of feel like we're a combination of the two personalities, the artistic and the structured. So how do you address that when you feel like you're kind of both? Or is that kind of the best of both worlds? I don't know.
I think it's awesome to be both. Like I think music departments generally flourish with people that lean a little more into the middle. Every department's going to have its fringes, its extreme people. But I think when the core of your team is a little mixture of both, I think that the success potential is huge. I think what you have to do is make sure that when you're collaborating with that group of people that are a little bit of both, make sure that everyone's not just thinking practically. Make sure that someone in that moment, whether you're planning Easter, whether you're planning Christmas, or you're just working on a worship set together, just take turns. Say, hey, listen, I'm going to think logistics. I'm going to think practical. Will you, during this next meeting, we need someone to be sure and keep their eye on the creative. We need to make sure we're thinking outside the box or bringing a creative element. And if you kind of throw that task around a little bit, then everybody sort of gets a turn to be creative and not have to think logistics. And people don't get burned out or feel like they're being pigeonholed, like, oh, they only rely on me for creative and they act like I can never do anything practical. So, just if you're collaborating with that group of people, just kind of call it roles for the day. Who's going to be thinking creatively, who's going to be thinking logistically, and change it up enough that everybody kind of enjoys the fact that they can do both.
Awesome. Thank you.
But that's a good problem. That's a good problem to have.
It is.
The less weird factor, the better. That's what I say.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate your question.
Absolutely.
Have a good night. Laura, one thing I wanted to ask you, or one thing I wanted to just comment on, was something you said earlier in the webinar, which I thought was really good, and something that I could take away from this is, I think many times, I'll just say myself, I think many times we do take those creative people that always have a voice, always have something to say, we sometimes take that as them picking or them trying to take over, when sometimes they're just, it's in their nature to want to be part of it, to be constantly adding, to create, and to not always look at that as something negative.
Yeah.
Unless it's obnoxious, of course.
Right. I actually had a situation fairly recently. We were wrestling with a creative decision. We're working right now on what our album art is going to be for our new Urshan project. And so I had reached out to a few people, And, you know, one person was just like, I don't really like it. I don't really get it. It doesn't do anything for me. I think it looks like a teen sci-fi advertisement. Yeah, it was. And you know, the thing is, in that moment, I had a decision to make as a leader. And I thought, well, I could sort of try to feed arguments back to that person about why I thought their opinion wasn't valid. But I remember I was busy, and so I took a few hours. I didn't even respond. And then the next day I was like, you know what? The most gracious thing to do is be like, wow, that's great feedback. Thank you. I need to know that somebody felt that way about that. And there was no point in arguing with their opinion. They had the right to that opinion, and in the end, it created less tension. It validated that person's role on the team. It honored their opinion, which is what I wanted. I wanted their opinion. I don't want them to feel like I'm not a safe leader, that they can't give their honest opinion. And in the end, I can wrestle with it all. We can process it all. But in the end, I felt so much better as a leader just sending back that email that said, hey, thank you. Because I think they were worried, like, did I offend you? Did I say too much? And I was like, no, your opinion is great. You know, thank you. And in the end, it was more effective to be a gracious leader and not jump at the opportunity to say, well, you know what, you're kind of critical or you're being too judgmental. Honestly, I think we gained more ground in the situation by welcoming the critique as a leader. And that's what leaders have to do with artistic types. Now, obviously, if it gets out of control, we've said, you deal with it, you approach it. But artistic types, you know, the way they buy in, you know, creative types are bought into your department when they speak up about things that need to be better. Just remember that every time someone complains that's a creative type, what they're saying is, I care enough about this music department to express my opinion because I want it to be the best it can be. And when you reframe that as a leader, the whole situation changes, and you can, as a team, grow from it.
Absolutely. That was well put. Very good. I definitely needed to hear that. I hope everybody that's been on tonight has really gained from this, because it is something we all work with, we all struggle with, we all learn as we go. And some people are doing this, Laura, for maybe the first time. You know, they brand new worship pastors and leaders, that this is valuable for them to say, man, you know, this is something I need to think about and learn, because we do over time working with people. Of course, you figure them out a little bit better. So you'll never figure them all out, I don't think, but we're doing our best. So thank you, Laura, tonight for being with us. This has been great.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who logged in tonight. I hope you've gotten a lot out of it.
It's been excellent. Everybody for joining us. Thank you tonight. Several people, I didn't get to all the questions, I'm sorry, but I do want to wrap this up tonight and let you know that we are so excited to bring this to you every month as members. I think it's vital and it's very important to have different leaders just speak into our lives and share their experiences. And so thank you for joining us. Laura, this is great. I mean, I think this is a wonderful tool that we've never had really before, to have apostolic leaders talking and sharing in our lives.
Definitely.
So I'm excited about next month. We'll be announcing our guest here soon, and it's going to be exciting. So anyway, for everybody else tonight, thank you for being here, and I see so many familiar faces or names, and thank you guys for joining. We'll see you guys next month. Thank you, Laura.
God bless. Good night.
Bye-bye.